All right, good afternoon. My name is Captain Jeffrey S. Paul from the Morris County Prosecutor's Office, and welcome to the press conference. I'm going to go over a couple of format items. I'm also going to give you the names and spelling so we can get it accurate with regards to those seated behind me. Starting to my right, your left, on the end is Supervising Assistant Prosecutor Leslie Wade, L-E-S-L-I-E, Wade, W-A-D-E. Next, we have Executive Assistant Prosecutor Robert Lane, L-A-N-E. Next is Deputy First Assistant Prosecutor Joseph Connor, C-O-N-N-O-R. Next is First Assistant Prosecutor Thomas Zelante, Z-E-L-A-N-T-E. You have Morris County Prosecutor Robert A. Bianchi, B-I-A-N-C-H-I. Deputy Chief William Schiavella, S-C-H-I-E-V-E-L-L-A. I'll be seated next to Deputy Chief Schiavella. Next, you have Lieutenant Stephen, P-H-E-N, Wilson, W-I-L-S-O-N, and Detective Robert McNally, M-C-N-A-L-L-Y. Each representative of the media should have gotten already, with the exception of Pat, the form, which is our records that we're giving you a press package at the conclusion of the press conference. So if that's filled out when you're done today, we will provide you with a press packet. In the press packet, you are going to have a DVD. The DVD is the DVD of the mobile video recorder that the prosecutor is going to be speaking about, and it'll be the same recording that you're watching here today. In the press packet is instructions with regards to how to play it, as well as the software to run the program. That'll be included. In addition, the comments that the prosecutor has prepared are also contained in the press packet, so you don't have to go crazy with regards to making sure you got the quotes down. What you're going to hear is contained in the press package as well. The format for today, Prosecutor Bianchi will be holding a press conference during which we will be playing two videos. One video will be the video from Officer Byrne's patrol car, and the second video will be the video from Officer Fernandez's patrol vehicle. And we will display a couple of exhibits which will explain or reinforce some of the issues that Prosecutor Bianchi is outlining in the press conference. Without further ado, Prosecutor Bianchi.
Thank you, Captain. My name is Robert Bianchi, and I have the privilege of serving as the Morris County Prosecutor. I'm here today to announce the grand jury findings and provide you with the investigative overview of the events that led to the shooting death of Ruben Martinez of Dover, New Jersey, by Denville Township Police Officer Richard Byrne on Thursday, June 26, 2008. First and foremost, I want to extend my condolences to the Martinez family for the loss of a loved one who, regardless of whatever legal happenings occur, will forever be impacted by this tragic situation. I want to thank the Martinez family attorneys, Mr. Darrell Saunders and Scott Leonard, with whom we have actively consulted during this investigation, as well as Chief Christopher Wagner and members of the Denville Township Police Department and the community and the media for their patience while this incident has been under investigation. At the outset, I realize that in a case of this nature, there are no winners or persons who can claim victory. The fact is that a tragic loss of life has occurred, and for that, there is no turning back or replays allowed. I also realize that regardless of the outcome of this proceeding, that there will be those who agree with the results and those who do not. That is to be expected. I wish to express my sentiments about the matter and the manner with which this matter has proceeded. From the outset, I assure all parties with competing interests that this office, the Morris County Prosecutor's Office, would be deaf to the chants and clamor of any party that attempted to place pressure upon this office to be swayed one way or the other. I promise that we would fairly, dispassionately, and deliberately gather, analyze, and prepare this matter with one guiding principle in mind, and to allow that which is the truth to be presented in an impartial manner and to follow the law undauntedly without any partisan interest whatsoever. We have done just that. A case of this nature is never easy, especially for a prosecutor's office. We very well realize that in the balance is the loss of the life of a human being, as well as the possibility that the shooting, if unjustified, would subject the officer to the possibility of a life term in prison. I had instructed my staff to allow such weighty matters to be resolved by simply doing the best that they could to determine the facts and to be concerned with only getting to the truth and not to be persuaded by sympathy, prejudice, or bias for any partisan interest. I thank my clerical staff, my investigative staff, and my attorney staff for a job well done in an admittedly difficult situation. They acted admirably, tirelessly, and unflinchingly, and I am proud of what they have done. A special thanks goes to my detectives in the Major Crimes Unit, led by Lieutenant Steve Wilson and Case Detective Robert McNally, as well as Major Crimes Supervising Attorney Les Wade, Executive Assistant Prosecutor Robert Lane, and Deputy First Assistant Prosecutor Joseph Connor, all of whom presented this matter before the grand jury. These career prosecutors, recognized in the legal community for their skill and ethics, and who represent the best of the legal staff that this office has to offer, simply were a team that were quite impressive, professional, and exhaustive. They took their roles in this matter very seriously and allowed the facts to be their only guide as to how to proceed. I put our best team together, as this case deserved nothing less. The circumstances of this matter were as extremely tragic as it can get, as the life of a young man has ended. But despite this tragedy, the legal principles that were involved were fairly straightforward. The only question to resolve is whether, given all the circumstances of this encounter, whether or not the deadly force employed by Officer Burns was justifiable in his defense or the defense of others from the imminent risk of serious bodily injury or death. If it is accepted that Officer Byrne or members of the community were in danger of such injury or death, then he was justified in using deadly force to eliminate that risk. After hearing from witnesses and considering the evidence, the special grand jury, consisting of 23 men and women, impaneled by the Morris County Assignment Judge for the sole purpose of hearing this matter alone, voted not to indict Officer Byrne for any violation of the New Jersey Criminal Code. They acted not as an arm of the prosecutor's office, but as an independent investigative body. Their proceedings are by law secret and may not be disclosed except for their ultimate findings, which, as I've indicated, were not to lodge charges against Officer Byrne. Until today, the limited release of information to the media and the public has allowed the Morris County Prosecutor's Office to conduct a thorough, independent, and objective investigation. We had an obligation to ensure that the facts and circumstances of this event were secured without the possibility that witnesses were affected by the premature release of information that was either unverified or had the potential to compromise our ability to obtain the sworn statements of witnesses or have a grand jury that could be tainted by formulating premature conclusions that are based on incomplete facts. This would have been a disservice to Mr. Martinez and his family, as well as Officer Byrne and his family, all of whom were entitled to an investigation that was untainted, accurate, and fair. I have stated on numerous occasions during this matter and throughout this investigation that I would not rush to judgment until all the facts were gathered and analyzed. This is the hallmark of handling the matter in a way that ensured that we did not jump to conclusions on partial and possibly inaccurate data. I have personally handled the oversight of this matter since its inception and have been involved in the legal oversight of this matter to the grand jury as well. I realize that I have a duty to the community to share the facts and circumstances surrounding the death of Mr. Martinez, and I am prepared to do that today. As I stated earlier, after a comprehensive review of this case, the grand jury decided not to indict for any violation of the criminal code. I'm going to take you through the investigative process that the Morris County Prosecutor's Office conducted in what I would term as an extremely exhaustive, thorough investigation that led no stone unturned or any crevice unchecked. Exhibit 1, Captain Paul, to your left, is the investigative and legal analysis is broken down into 5 distinct areas of consideration. 1, the facts of the shooting. 2, evaluation of the scene and all related facts and evidence. 3, the law of use of force and the Attorney General guidelines. 4, a review of Denville police records. 5, forensic evaluation from expert witnesses. Here is what our investigation revealed. On Thursday, June 26, 2008, at approximately 2:14 a.m., Officer Richard Byrne of the Denville Township Police Department was on duty assigned to District 1, which covers the area of Route 46 in the Township of Denville. Officer Daniel Fernandez was on duty assigned to District 2, which covers Route 10 in Denville Township. Officer Byrne and Officer Daniel Fernandez were both located in Denville Township Police Headquarters when a third officer, Officer Tobin, provided information over his police radio reporting that a vehicle, which was later determined to be operated by Mr. Martinez, was traveling north at 57 miles per hour on Franklin Road. Franklin Road is a 25-mile-per-hour zone. Officer Byrne exited police headquarters onto Savage Road and approached the intersection of Route 46 and Franklin Road. Most of this incident was captured on the 2 officers' motor vehicle data recorders, also known as MVRs. Those recordings showed that Officer Byrne encountered the Martinez vehicle at Franklin Road and Route 46 at the intersection directly across from Officer Byrne's location. The Martinez vehicle was observed making a right-hand turn from Franklin Road onto Route 46 East. This turn was made in violation of a posted sign indicating right turns at the red light were prohibited. Officer Byrne made a left-hand turn onto Route 46 East and pulled behind the Martinez vehicle, which was a 2001 Ford Mustang GT Bullet with Texas registration. Officer Byrne activated his emergency lights and attempted to effectuate a motor vehicle stop in the area of Franklin Road and Route 46 East. Officer Fernandez activated his emergency lights following Officer Byrne. Instead of stopping as is required by New Jersey law, Mr. Martinez immediately accelerated, increased speed, and turned right onto Legion Place. Officer Byrne notified headquarters that the vehicle was fleeing. Officer Byrne continued to follow the vehicle, providing his headquarters with the vehicle's location during its flight. At this point in time, Officer Byrne's MVR reported that his police vehicle was traveling between 38 to 47 miles per hour in a 25-mile-per-hour zone during the chase. Mr. Martinez's vehicle turned right onto Augusta Street, where he disregarded a stop sign. The vehicle then turned right onto Franklin Road, again disregarding a stop sign, whereupon Mr. Martinez lost control of the vehicle. Mr. Martinez's vehicle spun out and was facing in a southeasterly direction, partially on the road and partially on the sidewalk. The vehicle's excessive speed, combined with its not stopping at the intersection where there were stop signs, and attempting to make a right-angle turn, caused the vehicle to spin out so that it was going perpendicular against the flow of traffic. The distance traveled from the point where Officer Byrne observed Mr. Martinez's vehicle to the initial stop was 0.3 of a mile. As you will soon see on the MVR videos, Officer Byrne pulled up in front of Martinez's vehicle and approached the vehicle on the passenger side with his weapon drawn. It should be noted that the video clearly depicts Officer Byrne with his right index finger outside the trigger guard of the weapon. It should also be noted that the pulling of his weapon, as well as his finger on the outside of the trigger guard, complies with his police training, whereupon he attempted to get a suspect to submit by a show of force, but not having reason to use deadly force at that time. He kept his finger on the outside of the trigger guard to prevent from accidental discharge. Officer Byrne opened the passenger side door and gave verbal commands to Mr. Martinez to get out of the vehicle. Mr. Martinez did not respond or acknowledge Officer Byrne or his commands. Instead, Mr. Martinez can clearly be shown on the video attempting to restart and shift the car in an attempt to flee from the scene. Officer Byrne saw that Mr. Martinez was not in the possession of a weapon since he could see his hands, and he attempted to stop Mr. Martinez from fleeing. During this encounter, Officer Byrne reholstered his weapon while he continued to give verbal commands to Mr. Martinez to exit the vehicle, which were not complied with. The reholstering of his weapon was also in compliance with his training, as again, he did not have the right to use deadly force at that time, and his attempts to use his gun to get Mr. Martinez to submit to the arrest had failed. While the vehicle door was open, Officer Byrne had his shoulder in an area around or about the door frame of the motor vehicle and was bent over, ordering Mr. Martinez out of the vehicle. While Officer Byrne was still partially outside the vehicle, the engine revved and the car lunged forward. Simultaneously, Officer Byrne made a split-second decision as to what to do, and he decided to reach into the vehicle, attempting to disable it, and shut the vehicle off. Mr. Martinez attempted to drive the vehicle, and the vehicle lunged forward again. Officer Byrne then knelt into the vehicle in an attempt to stop Mr. Martinez for the safety of the public, and he struggled with him. Officer Byrne also noted that he smelled of the odor of an alcoholic beverage, which was later confirmed by toxicology reports and will be discussed later. Officer Fernandez approached the driver's side of the Martinez vehicle and attempted to physically restrain Mr. Martinez, grabbing his head and hitting it repeatedly on the door frame of the vehicle. Please note that the autopsy report described the head of Mr. Martinez as being atraumatic, which means that it was without trauma or injury. As a result of Officer Fernandez's actions, Mr. Martinez actually loosened his grip on the steering wheel and took his hands off the wheel. At that point, Officer Burns directed Officer Fernandez to release his grip and hold on Mr. Martinez because he believed that Mr. Martinez was going to become compliant. When Officer Fernandez let go, Mr. Martinez immediately placed the vehicle in gear, and the vehicle, again, abruptly lunged forward. Despite the physical efforts of both Officer Byrne and Fernandez, Mr. Martinez was successful in placing the vehicle into gear. Officer Byrne attempted to get the vehicle out of gear and to get the keys out of the ignition, but he was unsuccessful in those attempts. The vehicle then lunged forward and backward. Eventually, the vehicle lunged forward and accelerated at a great speed, causing the passenger door of Mr. Martinez's vehicle to hit Officer Byrne's vehicle, slamming Mr. Martinez's passenger door shut. That's the door that the police officer was in. As you will see, Officer Byrne fortuitously was able to move his legs into the Martinez car. This prevented Officer Byrne from being trapped between the Mustang and his patrol vehicle. This flight from police had now turned into resisting arrest, aggravated assault upon a police officer, and easily could have killed Officer Byrne, as you will see, but for his split-second reaction of pulling his legs into the vehicle just prior to the door slamming shut. Officer Byrne was now, however, trapped in the vehicle as Mr. Martinez departed at a high rate of speed, first driving on the sidewalk and then on the wrong side of the road, while greatly increasing speed, as will be discussed later. Mr. Martinez's actions had now escalated into kidnapping of a police officer. Officer Fernandez ran back to his patrol vehicle and radioed for backup while following the route of Mr. Martinez. Officer Byrne continued to yell commands to Mr. Martinez, ordering him to stop the vehicle as he accelerated and increased speed rapidly. It should be noted that due to Officer Byrne being trapped in the Martinez vehicle, his MVR lost audio reception since the officer was separated from his patrol vehicle. Mr. Martinez failed to comply with the commands to stop, and the vehicle shifted through gears while it was accelerating. It should be noted that Mr. Martinez was driving a high-performance Mustang and was a mechanic by trade. The Mustang came to final rest in fourth gear. It was later determined that Mr. Martinez was driving while on the suspended list in New Jersey. Mr. Martinez failed to look at Officer Byrne in response to all of his communication and attempts to have him stop the vehicle. Officer Byrne described Mr. Martinez's response as, quote, a blank stare, end quote. The vehicle was accelerating at such a high rate of speed that within seconds, Officer Byrne believed he was not going to survive the incident. He feared the driver would hit another vehicle, killing other people and himself. The Martinez vehicle reached speeds in excess of 80 miles per hour. Officer Byrne thought to himself, quote, I'm going to die tonight, end quote. At that point, Officer Byrne pulled out his service weapon and gave a final order to Mr. Martinez to stop the vehicle. Mr. Martinez failed to comply. Fearing for his life, Officer Byrne discharged 5 rounds, all of which struck Mr. Martinez. Forensic evidence indicates that the rounds were in all probability fired within 2 seconds. One of the 5 shots struck the heart and was determined by 2 forensic pathologists to be the fatal shot. At that point, Mr. Martinez's vehicle veered that a vehicle reaching speeds with an unrestrained passenger of upwards to 80 to 95 miles per hour and 55 to 65 miles per hour over the speed limit in a residential area poses a risk of serious injury and likely death. While we wish this matter had never occurred, my sworn oath is to fairly assess the actions of this nature and be guided by the facts and the law only. That is what has been done, nothing more and nothing less. The grand jury has spoken, and this matter now turns to the process of healing from an otherwise unalterable tragedy. Again, my condolences are offered to the Martinez family.
The prosecutor is going to take a few questions, but I just want to caution you. There's a tremendous amount of information that's in the packages. You're going to get the entire information that the prosecutor just has prepared and read to you. This case involves a voluminous amount of files, as you can imagine, and lots of documents. And it would be inappropriate for us to cite specific findings and the results of certain tests and those kind of things off the cuff without that material. So we are not going to be able to answer specific questions here, not because we don't necessarily have the data, but because we didn't bring all the files upstairs. So bear with us, but if you have a few questions, the prosecutor will be happy to entertain those.
Can you just say, you said his license was suspended. It's not the most important question, but where? Suspended in New Jersey or Texas?
It's suspended in New Jersey.
So he had a New Jersey license?
It's suspended in New Jersey. He has no driving privileges in the state of New Jersey.
Can I just ask, as far as the officer getting into the car, is that usual, like the procedure if you got a guy that's not doing what he's supposed to do? Is that...
There's nothing specifically that deals with a procedure of this nature. You know, we don't have police officers that have a calculus that have to be followed when making split-second decisions. Jeff, I'm sorry. There is a matter of common sense and I think training, and there was some confusion about this, that typically you don't, in a motor vehicle stop, reach into the driver's side and try to take the keys out because the officer is now exposed to being grabbed and manipulated. However, people have to understand a very significant distinction with police officers as opposed to ordinary citizens. Police officers are required by law to act. The response by a police officer in this circumstance, i.e. worrying about a potentially intoxicated driver who has eluded the police from continuing to flee down the street where there could be incidents, you saw there were cars coming the other way. We do have evidence of other vehicles and pedestrians, in and about the area, is to disable the vehicle. It's not to politely allow the door to, shut the door and say, okay, it's fine, you may now proceed. So there is nothing that specifically to address your question says that he can't do it. What he was trying to do was to disable the vehicle, so that obviously he wasn't able to continue in its path, and as a result was unsuccessful, and the rest is history, as they say. Next.
Prosecutor, I was just curious about policy. Was it the intention, I suppose, of the officer to just stop him or to injure him, or when officers pull their guns here, is it the intent to kill? I'm
Okay.
just trying to get the...
Yeah, well, the last question is a little bit more objectively answerable by me. As I indicated previously in the statement, the removing of a weapon is what is referred to. We have a use of force continuum in the state of New Jersey. It goes everywhere from constructive authority to physical contact to physical force to deadly force. Now, police officers are not required to follow a set, situation. They're required to respond based upon the force that's being presented to them. In essence, in many instances, it's the actor or the individual that's dictating the response by the use of force of the officer. It is not against the policy. In fact, they are trained that as part of their constructive authority, that would be in a police car, turning your lights on. That's an example of your authority. The uniform and your badge, that's like that gentleman right in front of you from the Sheriff's Department. That would be an immediate recognizable sign of the authority. And so is pulling the weapon out. The thing that was interesting when you watch this video is that Officer Byrne complied with policy when he pulled the weapon out and attempted to get him to submit to his constructive authority, but he had his finger on the outside of the trigger guard. As you may remember, in Los Angeles many years ago, there were problems in terms of training because officers were pulling their weapons out for constructive authority, but in the heat of the moment, with the adrenaline pumping, in a situation where they stumble, shots were being fired because their fingers were on the trigger. So Officer Byrne followed policy with regard to the removal of the weapon, having his finger on the outside of the trigger guard, and then, when that was not helpful in terms of subduing him, reholstering the weapon, because at that time he would not have been appropriately using deadly force. So pulling the weapon out is not deadly force.
But when he fired at that point,
That's deadly force.
How would you characterize Officer Byrne's conduct overall in firing the shots?
Well, in terms of, what do you mean in terms of firing the shots? He fired the shots, 5 shots he hit. They are trained to hit center mass.
In terms of justification?
Well, I think the grand jury has spoken on that particular facet. But, I mean, obviously, again, if the facts there suggest that if there is a risk of serious bodily injury or death, an officer is allowed to employ the use of deadly force to protect himself or others, and I think that's exactly what Officer Byrne did. I mean, as you recognize, you have to look at a car as a 2,000-pound bullet or missile, and every second that it's traveling, it's increasing the rate of speed to 7 to 14 miles per hour. You get to a certain point where it's almost certain that you're going to sustain serious bodily injury or death as an unrestrained person if you don't stop the action and stop it immediately.
So, Mr. Prosecutor, what happened then to the officer after the shots were fired? Did he injure himself in the car when the car stopped? What occurred there?
Yeah, he was injured. His shoulder was injured, and actually you saw on the video, he was the person that came out. The water that you see is the pool water that had broken from the pool, and he's the one that's putting his hands down and saying to the sergeant, I had to shoot him. That's all Officer Byrne that you're seeing on that video.
And he was able to holster his weapon at that high rate of speed?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. It's a good question. It's an interesting thing. Many years ago there was, I don't remember what jurisdiction it was, but the officers were trained when they were trying to save lead from their cartridges. They would fire their rounds when they were being trained, and then they would drop the cartridges on the ground. But before they reloaded, they would pick them back up again because they were saving the lead. And what they were finding was that the officers were going to shootouts, and they were firing the shots, and then before they reloaded, they were actually at scenes bending down, picking up their cartridges and putting it in their pants. The training is, the point of that story is that the training is very important because most times the officers do follow the training because it's so imbued in their mind. And part of that is if you're not using your weapon, it's to reholster the weapon. It's a reflexive action of most police officers.
And you believe he was able to do that with that car traveling at that rate of speed, hitting something?
Well, you see his weapon when he's coming out from the scene. He had his weapon with him holstered. Yes.
So before he even, just help me out here, I saw it, but I just want to get it right. He comes out, he has the weapon, and then as he gets into the car, it looks like he doesn't have his weapon. Does he reholster it even before he jumps into the car to encounter Martinez and try to, stop him?
Yes, you see on the video, and maybe you need to see it. He uses the weapon. He has the weapon out.
Right.
He makes his commands. There's no compliance. He reholsters the weapon.
Okay. All right.
Is the officer's instruction by way of his training when he does unholster the weapon, and even in that split second decides to fire, is his instruction to shoot to kill or shoot to stop?
They're trained to shoot to eliminate the risk. They're trained to shoot center mass. They're trained to shoot center mass because, one, it's a wider target, and two, the vital organs are in center mass. So it's not to shoot to kill, but it's to shoot to incapacitate and stop the action. Some people have asked questions about why 5 bullets and why not 4 bullets. The other thing is and I think common sense, sometimes some of these things can be just thought through with common sense. Well, in a situation that's unfolding as rapidly as it is, you don't shoot twice or once, wait, see what happens, shoot, one more time, see what happens. You're shooting to make sure that you eliminate the risk. You see many cases where people actually unload an entire clip in their magazine all the bullets in their magazine. You didn't see that here. You saw 5 shots and probably fired within 2 seconds. So it was a pretty contained area and a pretty contained amount of shots.
how many bullets did he have in his gun?
13, I believe.
Mr. Prosecutor, was he on his knees on the front seat of on the passenger side of that car? Or was he on the floor of the car? It sounds like he was hitting the suspect.
As you see, when the car is moving back and forth and jostling, in a sense, it's kind of pushing him towards the vehicle. When he made the decision to to try to get the gear shift and to get the keys, he put his knees on the passenger seat of the vehicle. While he was traveling down that road, now we don't have an MVR tape of that, but while he was being traveling down that road and the car was switching very quickly into gears, he was being thrown about inside of the vehicle.
So when fired the shot, it was on the seat? Or-
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Prosecutor, how long do you estimate and how far of a distance, if you could clarify, was the officer and Mr. Martinez in the car before it ended?
It was approximately 9.5 seconds from beginning to end.
From the time he got in the car?
From the time that left the scene, after the door hit the police cruiser, to the time that the vehicle came to rest at the pool. Approximately 9.5 seconds.
At any time did Martinez say anything?
There is a time, the only statement that was made by Mr. Martinez during the entire encounter was after all 5 rounds had been fired, where he indicated, blurted out, "I can't feel my legs." And right after that, the car veered off to the left and went over the curb at 89 miles an hour. Anybody else?
Yes, is there any review of protocol about how in the future a police officer should be approaching a vehicle?
Well, there's.
Rather than entering, not entering the vehicle?
Are you asking me about this case in particular?
Well, is there a future, review of regulations to determine that, or?
All police officer-involved shootings are reviewed obviously by the county prosecutor, and will probably be reviewed by the attorney general as well in terms of training issues, if any, that may be implicated by any police-involved shooting. This, I will have to tell you, I scoured high and far, and I'm not saying that there does not exist, but people in the law enforcement community itself across the country were kind of at a loss with this one because they've never heard of a situation where an officer was actually trapped within the vehicle as the vehicle is actually taking off. So, I mean, it is unique. I'm not saying it never happened, but it certainly is a unique scenario that they are not, I don't think, specifically trained on. They're not trained on specifics of every scenario. They're trained on the use of force continuum, and they're trained in terms of how to use the weapons and how to employ that use of force continuum, because as you can see from this incident, officers can rarely detect, every single circumstance that's going to happen. They have to be flexible in their decision-making process.
Prosecutor, what is Officer Byrne doing right now?
He is currently on, I believe, sick leave. He's not back at work at this point in time.
Is he expected to go back?
Well, he has a shoulder injury that I'm aware of that's also going to require some surgery, and I do not have any information at this point in time. Everybody's kind of deflating from the situation. It was obviously very emotional on both sides, and what Officer Byrne does, I don't know at this point in time.
And about Officer Fernandez?
Officer Fernandez is back on duty.
Did the grand jury release?
Yes. Would you be making any recommendations as a prosecutor about his future with the police department? Should he go right back on duty, or?
Well, I'm not making any specific recommendations. I will speak to the chief, and I assume you're talking about Officer Byrne.
Right.
I will make recommendations to the chief, and certainly we want to make sure that he's not physically injured. I will tell you that he is very emotional, obviously, by the fact that he was responsible, no matter whether he was justified or not, in taking the life of another human being. That's a heavy burden for anybody to bear. So we'll wait and see.
When did you tell the family? When did you disclose the findings to the family?
I'm not getting into what we disclosed with the family. We have been in contact with the family since the inception of this matter. They have had an opportunity to review the videotape from very, very early on in this case, I'd say within the first couple of days. The family is obviously nothing that happens in any legal proceeding is going to make this right for the family. So in terms of our communications with them, I'm keeping that private between us.
Thank you very much. We're going to have those press packages. If we could just ask that you take one per outlet. We appreciate it. Put stuff out with those completed forms, and we'll make sure you get packaged.